Marriage. We've all done it. Wait, scratch that. Marriage. It's prominent in today's society. We've seen it in our parents, our teachers, our cousins, movies, TV shows, and even in our own futures. It is one of the 7 sacraments of the Catholic Church, and arguably one of the most unique. Unlike the other 6 sacraments, marriage, or matrimony, developed years before Catholicism even reached it, leaving many opportunities for various social reform movements to incite change. Many traditional values that we see in marriage today were beginning to be established in the 12th century with the rise of Christianity. However, the line between traditional marriage values and personal satisfaction is beginning to be blurred by many new developments, one being the idea of cohabitation. The only way to understand how cohabitation came about is to understand the last 4,000 years of marriage. Let's do a quick review. The developments that occurred can be split into 7 different time periods. The first recorded marriage occurred in 2350 BC for the sole purpose of creating an alliance between tribes. Before this event, men, women, and children all lived together in family groups, but through marriage, women became the man's property. Marriage even occurred between siblings and cousins to secure property. The Christians would not approve of Mesopotamia. Another important thing to note during this time period is that marriage had no ties to love. In the 6th through 17th centuries, the creation story in the Old Testament established the first Christian ideas of marriage. Mosaic law was the guide during this time, which allowed for divorce and polygamy and established the idea of a private marriage contract. Then, Christianity began to increase its influence, but marriage was still an economic institution and a show of power for males. Civil marriages were later blessed by a priest, and as time went on, they were held on the steps of the church. Strict rules were created, and the idea of cohabitation was born. Cohabitation was promptly outlawed. The Protestant Reformation attempted to make marriage solely a political process, discrediting Catholicism. Regardless, both churches and governments actively persecuted those who participated in cohabitation. Marriage was appealing because it offered social and legal status to families, whereas cohabitation did not. The Enlightenment caused an uproar, making marriage about personal desire and love instead of religious commitment. Cohabitation was eliminated as a criminal offense in Western Europe and was therefore becoming socially acceptable. Increase of technology led to social freedom, a new culture that caused marriage rates to decrease and divorce rates to increase. This same culture of freedom persists today, lifting interracial and same-sex marriage restrictions, increasing the amount of people who marry for love only to 88%, and increasing the amount of people who cohabitate to 44%. We have seen that marriage has transitioned away from secular ambitions towards symbolic religious ideologies and then back to a more secular approach. Why are young people reverting back to this approach despite the prominence of long-standing Catholic traditions? Now that we know the history of marriage, now we have to understand the rights of marriage and the Church's view on marriage. Isn't this a project on cohabitation? Yes, but cohabitation is very sacramental, and marriage is the sacrament that we need to be focused on. So we need to understand marriage before we can understand cohabitation. So what are we waiting for?
There are 3 rights of marriage. The right for celebrating marriage during Mass for 2 baptized Catholics, the right for celebrating marriage outside Mass for a baptized Catholic and a non-Catholic Christian, and the right for celebrating marriage between a baptized Catholic and non-Christian, which is a non-sacramental marriage. Before marriage, Catholics who marry non-Catholics must obtain permission from the Church and promise to raise their children Catholic. During marriage, the bride and groom mutually confer upon each other the sacrament by expressing their consent before the Church. Many dioceses require the couple to take a marriage preparation program, teaching them about finances, in-laws, family size, children's education, values, preferences, sexuality, and conflict styles. During the ceremony, the couple exchanges consent with the priest and 2 other people as witnesses. The couple also receives a nuptial blessing after the Lord's Prayer, and at the end of the Mass, calling on God's grace and love to bless the couple. After giving consent, they exchange marriage vows. The couple also exchanges ring, which represent eternal love, to represent their lifelong love for each other, Jesus' eternal commitment to the Church, and God's eternal commitment to humanity. Marriage is a lifelong covenant between man and woman, and like the relationship between the Church and Jesus, it is an unbreakable covenant. Through marriage, couples help to support each other and grow. Matrimony intensifies baptism, and through it, the spouses exercise priesthood by offering daily sacrifices for loving each other. In marriage, the spouses are the ministers of the sacrament, while the priest serves as the official witness of the Church. Matrimony is a sacrament that confers grace and a public commitment for the good of the couple, Church, and society. It helps the spouses to grow in spiritual perfection and serve the common good. Marriage is ordered to procreation, and thus, the greatest fruit of marriage is children.
Like us.
The sacrament of marriage does not end with the church ceremony. It is a lifelong sacrament, and the graces of marriage continuously help the bride and groom to grow in faith. Through marriage, the spouses and their children enter into communion with each other. There are 8 graces of marriage. Communion with the spouse, which allows the couple to overcome selfishness and give themselves to each other fully. It gives them an everlasting love and communion with each other and God. This allows them to maintain another grace, fidelity. This grace helps the couple to maintain their promise and continue to grow with one another. Another grace is openness to new life. This grace allows the couple to become partners with God in creating children, the supreme gift of marriage. Through natural family planning, couples can time their pregnancies so that they conform to the generosity appropriate to responsible parenthood. Couples who cannot bear children can help society through social work and charity. The next grace is unity of marriage. This grace helps the mutual growth of the couple by recalling the mystery of incarnation through which God chose to make his love visible through Jesus. The couple is to love one another unconditionally. Communion with Christ. Through this grace and communion, the spouses receive the Holy Spirit as the communion of love of Christ, and the Holy Spirit acts as the seal of their covenant and the source of their love and fidelity. Most importantly, they encounter Christ in one another and are invited into the Paschal mystery, allowing them to make sacrifices for each other and forgive each other. The next grace is family communion. This grace enables the couple to create a family and help the family members act as Christ to each other, which means showing love, respect, and dignity. Married couples act as educators of the faith to their children. The family is a domestic church, meaning that the members exercise the priesthood of the baptized through reception of the sacraments, and that the home is where children first receive their proclamation of faith. Communion with the church. Through this grace, families share in the life and mission of the church and proclaim the good news of God's love for us, and that married couples share in this love. Families promote faith and evangelization by participating in the church and serving the needs of the parish by helping to provide volunteers. The last grace is communion with society. This grace helps families to become involved with and be in service to community. This is done by socializing children, which teaches them how to communicate, respect others, and contribute to the common good. Participation in politics in order to safeguard family values, and working for justice and peace by serving others, standing up against oppression, teaching conflict resolution, and emphasizing the dignity of others.
We chose to include the graces of marriage because they accurately describe why it is necessary for couples to marry before they live together. So what does the church think about people who do not choose to marry and follow those graces? Well, first of all, what is cohabitation? By the Oxford Dictionary, cohabitation is the state of living together and having a sexual relationship without being married.
Because of the intimacy of living with each other, there are many opportunities that may tempt you. The church also feels that by living together, you are enjoying the benefits of marriage without actually being committed, almost like using each other for a test ride, which objectifies the other person and encourages non-commitment. If we do not engage in this, our spouse becomes more special to us. Why does the church teach that having sex before marriage is wrong? The church encourages sex.
Hold on, that's not what I was taught in school.
But only during marriage. Its only 2 purposes are procreation and unity. As a gift from God, it must be used appropriately during marriage. Sex is the consummation of marriage, during which a couple is united as one, and by using it outside of that, it is used to feel good physically, rather than being used as the powerful thing it's meant to be. It is also an emotional experience that represents unity for life. But by doing it and then leaving the other person, sex is degraded. The church only allows for affectionate actions that do not overstep the boundary of being sexual. Sex is meant to express love for our spouse, but by using sex wrongly, we offend God and the other person by using their body as a tool. Living together before marriage also hurts relationships. At the start of a relationship, couples often feel love-struck, and as time goes on, those feelings fade. This leads them to more easily see the faults of others, and couples who are not committed will often more easily break up because of minor arguments. Married couples, though, enter into commitment together through good and bad times and through major challenges. Living together before marriage won't teach you about commitment. What are the consequences for living together before marriage? Studies show that couples who live together before marriage are 50% more likely to divorce, and less than 50% actually do get married. Violence against women is also more likely in cohabitating couples. Children of married couples are usually mentally and physically healthier than those of cohabitating couples. Cohabitating couples that do get married and have children, they are more likely to divorce, and because of that divorce, their children are often traumatized by this.
Okay. Enough with that. To really understand cohabitation, we need to look at something that we're more familiar with. So now we're going to look at society's views. Take it away.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Peer Thoughts and Peer Polls. I sent out a Google Forms and asked our classmates to fill out some questions. Here's the first one. Do you consider cohabitation a sin? First respond.
I don't think cohabitation is a sin because living together for a while can give a couple time to get used to integrating their lifestyles. Cohabitation before marriage might even give a couple an extra foundation that may decrease the chances of divorce. I do believe that premarital sex is a sin. Cohabitation does not have to include premarital sex.
Thanks. Second one.
I do believe it is a sin if the couple living together before marriage does not have the intention of getting married and they are only together for a certain purpose.
Finally,
cohabitation is a sin because it harms the sacredness of marriage. It can damage the relationship by adding financial struggles, abuse, and distrust.
So why do it? Let's look at 7 reasons.
Reason 1, they want to test it. Between 1965 and 1985, there was a 400% increase in cohabitating couples and an 80% increase between 1980 and 1990. This was coupled with a surge of number in divorces. Why? Because they were allowed to choose who they wanted to love. Therefore, they lived together to see if they were compatible for marriage. Reason 2, financial benefits. 2.9 million couples who are cohabitating cite they save money by living together. This is because many individuals may not be ready for the financial commitment of marriage. Cohabitation is the perfect solution. In addition, 1 million people who are cohabitating already have a child under the age of 15, which can be financially draining. Cohabitation can lessen this burden by splitting the cost of rent and food as well as education. Reasons 3 and 4, convenience and sexual need. Couples develop intimacy and often a sexual dependence on each other. By living together, they can learn to develop intimacy through sex. Also, it's convenient to be near with the one you love. Reasons 5 and 6, insecurity and escape. Fear of loneliness and the need for companionship leads some couples to live together before marriage because they feel they need to be around each other constantly. And if they do get married, this insecurity can lead to a lack of trust in the fidelity of the other. Escape. Some choose to live together to escape another living situation they did not like, making their relationship more about the escape and less about the love you have for your partner. Reason 7, no fear of pregnancy. In earlier times, premarital pregnancy was deterrent to cohabitation, but with the rise of contraceptions, the risk of this decreased, leading many to cohabitate. Did your parents cohabitate? Looks like it's about even. 44% said no, 55% said yes. In our society, cohabitation is something that is generally accepted with the idea of dating someone. Many Americans agree that couples who do and don't cohabitate can raise children equally well. Over 70% of youth surveyed accept cohabitation. Shocking new polls revealed that people are more likely to have cohabitated than married. Why has that changed? And how does cohabitation in our society affect the relationship? It has changed because the religious aspect of society has disappeared. Increasingly secular society has increased cohabitation as they no longer value sex and marriage as sacred. Therefore, premarital sex and cohabitation increased dramatically. With this ever-increasingly sexual society, cohabitation has decreased the sacredness of sex and marriage as a whole.
Okay, but why does this matter? Well, studies have actually shown that 36% of people who are affiliated with a religion describe themselves as very happy compared to the 25% of those who are not religiously affiliated. This means that the lack of sacredness caused by cohabitation leads to an increase in divorce rates. That's when cohabitation gained popularity. You know what time it is. Time for another Peer Thoughts. If your parents cohabitated, are they still together?
Everyone's parents who did cohabitate are still together.
So far, we've looked at the views of both the church and society. So why not combine the two? The best way to do that is through a priest. So we asked Father Mark Zittel, Assistant Director of Campus Ministry for Faith Formation and the Sacraments of Fordham University, to help us understand cohabitation through the context of modern theology.
Obviously, we've been talking about cohabitation, and short term it seems like a pretty good idea, but obviously there are some long-term negative effects. What do you think would be some long-term negative effects that you've seen or heard about?
I think one of the long-term negative effects of cohabitation is that the couples are not affording themselves the opportunity to think about the long-term trajectory of the relationship. Is it just about being together, being in love, or is there a deeper foundation of prayer, who we are as a couple, and experiencing intimacy in different ways? There's emotional intimacy, psychological intimacy. It's not just physical intimacy.
And people that do love each other and they do want to get married, but they want to cohabitate, to start preparing for their wedding life, how do you think that should work?
The one thing I would point to is that there have been studies that have revealed that couples who cohabitate prior to marriage have higher divorce rates. And so I think sometimes those other important dimensions of a lifelong bonding relationship need to be nurtured and really thought about how they're going to be supported.
Outside of the faith, and when it comes to the health of the relationship, why should all people refrain from cohabitation?
Is there a firm, well-articulated foundation of who the couple is before they move in together and before they begin a life together? Do they talk about what their dreams and aspirations are? Do they talk about career? Do they talk about money, for example? That's a huge issue that comes up in relationships later. You know, there's all these different confluence of things about how you're going to live your life 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And when those conversations are unhad, it can be really difficult. And I say that outside of a faith context.
How can Catholics fight the temptations of premarital sex and cohabitation?
There's a great book written by St. John Paul II, Love and Responsibility. And in chapter 3, he talks about the flourishing of the other. And I think from a faith perspective, that's the nucleus. We're looking at how can I help the other flourish? How can I help them become fully alive? That's really powerful to think about for couples coming together. Am I committed to making my lifelong partner, my spouse, really flourish in life? From a perspective of faith, for a couple to sit down and talk about how committed they are to one another is crucial to a long-term successful relationship.
How can a healthy marriage maintain sacramentality?
Every marriage is sacramental, but the question is, how does that grace of that sacrament, how can it be nourished and how can it flourish? I think it's really important to look at not only how will we support one another individually, but how will we remain strong and support ourselves as people of faith through growing this grace that we receive through the sacrament of matrimony. When a couple is married, who is the minister of the sacrament?
They are.
Correct. Excellent. There's something really powerful in that. And I think that that has to be really highlighted, that they are giving themselves freely and completely to one another to ensure the flourishing of one another. I think that's the starting point of a perspective that this sacrament is real and that it's in how we encounter each other as husband and wife, that we encounter Christ. And that's the grace of the sacrament. With that type of perspective, that's how a healthy marriage emerges.
What are the best ways for married couples to stay together in the face of hardships and obstacles?
When couples move into cohabitation, it's all about we love each other, we want to navigate life together. And then that's all well and good. But then remember the marriage vows for sickness and in health, for better and for worse. There was an interesting study, I think it was McGill University in Toronto, and they had couples who lived in labs and they observed them. What they found was that couples who showed one another small gestures of kindness and forgiveness, when big things came up, there was a reservoir of grace that they could draw from that would help them overcome the bigger things. And the bigger things were healed more quickly. Couples that did not show that they had that capacity for regular gestures of kindness, for regular gestures of forgiveness, that they didn't have the same resiliency that other couples did. If a couple is grounded in the sacraments, that foundation must be there so that when the tough times come, there is that reservoir of grace to draw from.
Thanks, Father Mark.
As we're sure everyone has been wondering, what are our thoughts on this issue? Well, all of our parents cohabitated, so we are the living results of the success of cohabitation.
Although we see and understand the benefit and how it has become so normalized in our society, we also think cohabitation should not be practiced because it hurts the relationship. Cohabitation can lead to distrust, sex, solving issues, abuse, financial burdens, and issues with children. We agree with the church and believe that waiting until marriage for sex and cohabitation preserves the sacredness of sex, marriage, and the relationship. We also believe education on marriage will help those who confuse lust and love. Finally, to bring back those who have lost their way with cohabitation, we believe the church has to work with the younger generations to promote chastity.
Speaking of education, it's time for our final peer thoughts, where we asked our peers what are some suggestions for a positive way forward.
We should talk to our parents about their honest opinions on cohabitation so we can receive a more experienced viewpoint.
I think sitting down with teenagers and discussing the future about sex and cohabitation is a positive way forward. By teaching teens about the dangers of cohabitation, we can work to maintain marriages and keep divorce rates low.
Bring up actual statistics and sources and give people the ability to research the effects of premarital sex and cohabitation, especially trends.
Now it's time to unravel the greatest mystery. How does cohabitation affect families? Cohabitating women are twice as likely to experience injuries stemming from abuse and experience more than one form of physical violence, which in turn leads to higher divorce rates and lower productivity rates. This has a long-term effect on families. On average, children of divorces, which is more likely among couples that cohabitated, have lower educational attainment and lower income. They are 16 and 24% less likely to be enrolled in private school, and children who are 4 or under at the time of the divorce are more likely to repeat a grade. As adults, they are more likely to be put into an institution or fall below the poverty line. Even more interesting is that higher divorce rates have led to a 12% overall increase in violent crime rates, especially among 15 to 24-year-olds. Among this age group, there has been a 40% increase in murder rates and a 36% increase in aggravated assault rates. Also, because they have lower income and lower educational attainment, they are more likely to stay poor and stay economically stagnant, which in turn affects their children. In addition, divorce means that the care of the children is more likely to be imposed upon one parent, meaning that the parent has to spend more time working to support their children or spend time with their children at the expense of income. When children spend less time with their parents, they are more likely to perform poorly in school and have worse mental well-being. If the parent chooses to spend more time with their children, now the family has a higher chance for entering poverty because they have less income, which in turn leads to a higher chance of crime and more poverty in the future. In contrast, here are the effects of marriage. When people are married, it imposes a restraint because the couple is committed to each other, leading to a decrease in criminal activities or want to do them. Marriage also leads to gender desistance. Women are more likely to take on management of the household. Marriage also deters people from engaging in risky behavior. Marriage usually comes with people taking responsibility. Now they have to be committed to taking care of their family. When there are two sources of income, it permits both parents the ability to spend more time with their children, cultivating better mental well-being and future welfare of the children. Better mental well-being leads to better performance in school and a decrease in likelihood of future crime or poverty.